players should you trade for? And which players should you trade away? What's going on, football fans and fantasy freaks? It's Mitch here with a buy low, sell high fantasy football video before week 4. That sounds good. Gronk spike the like button. Don't forget to subscribe for more fantasy football advice just like this here on OwnersBox Fantasy. And let me know if you have any trade questions at all in the comment section below. Let's kick off the buy low, sell high candidates with the quarterback position. At quarterback, my favorite buy low is Brock Purdy. He's currently the QB 10, which is a QB 1. But given the quarterback position, I think Purdy is an excellent asset, and he's probably not thought of as a QB 1 in fantasy, especially with injuries to McCaffrey, Debo, Kittle, Ayuk not playing that well. Like, everyone thinks the Niners are going down. Everyone thinks they're trending down, but they're actually getting weapons back in the future. And yes, they're 1-2, but the last loss they had featured one of the best games I've ever seen Brock Purdy play, and he was actually running more. Like, in hero mode with less weapons around him, he's actually having to use his legs, which adds another layer of fantasy points to Brock Purdy. And what I love about Purdy is the fact that he's in this Shanahan offense that has such a high floor weekly. It doesn't matter who they play. The New York Jets defense, the Steelers defense, whoever they're playing, right? He's going to be able to go out there and still have a productive day. He might not win you a week every week. He'll certainly have 3-4 touchdown games like he did against the Rams, but he's also going to provide a safe floor. And given the position right now, there's a lot of guys that are up and down and all around, and there's not a lot of guys you can rely on. So Purdy in this offense, the Niners offense is potent. Their defense is not playing that well, which means that he has to score more points, put up more yards, and he's actually throwing for a lot of yards. I think Purdy is slept on in general. Like, you can get him for not that much, which makes him a buy low despite his production. And I believe his upside for the rest of the season with some of his playmakers actually coming back. Sell high candidate at the quarterback position is Patrick Mahomes, who actually right now is only the QB 13, which is lower than Brock Purdy. There's a chance that you could get another player along with Brock Purdy and swap him for Patrick Mahomes. And I think that straight up, it's probably a good move. Like, Patrick Mahomes right now in fantasy is just a name. He's not really providing any sort of value. And I think people will see this as a buy low opportunity. You're going to trick them because I actually think this is a sell high. I don't see the prospects for a great Chiefs offense. This is a defensive team. Mahomes has essentially become this year a game manager. He's throwing the ball at the line of scrimmage. He's getting the ball out hot. He's protecting his bad tackle play on his offensive line. He's doing everything he can to not turn it over, to not make mistakes, throw the ball short, get yards after catch. Sure, he might have a couple big games this year, but when you really think about Mahomes in the playoffs last year, in the regular season last year, how many great fantasy days did Mahomes actually have? Like, the last 2 years, this team has all been about close games, defense, Mahomes performing at the end of the games. He's better in real life than he is in fantasy right now. And I don't think everyone in your league will realize that. I think people are going to still see, oh, Patrick Mahomes. Some people think he's the greatest of all time, all that mumbo jumbo, right? You can sell that to your league mates. If you have Mahomes, you can sell that and potentially get something out of it. So there's just so many other quarterbacks that are going to give you the same value as Mahomes, to where you can use his name brand and the prospect of what he has been in fantasy before and statistically before, and use that to upgrade the rest of your roster. So I would sell Patrick Mahomes right now. At the running back position, one of my favorite buy lows is James Conner, a guy that I told you to draft plenty of this offseason. James Conner is currently the RB 18, but he just smells like an RB1 by the end of the year, as long as he's healthy. He is, without a doubt, a workhorse running back in this offense for Arizona that's currently a top 5 scoring offense. Conner pretty much had 2 pretty solid fantasy days in the first 2 weeks. But then he took on the Lions, and he's coming off a game where he did not play that well, and he was not productive for fantasy, which means you should go after him right now because things are going to get easier, especially against Washington coming up. So I would go after him right now because Detroit is elite against the run. They're elite at limiting running backs. So James Conner is coming off probably the worst game of his season. For the rest of the year, I think he's going to be somebody that you basically start and you forget about it. He's going to catch the ball enough. He's going to run the ball 15 plus times a game. He's going to score 1 to 2 touchdowns a game. That feels like James Conner to me. With Kyler Murray, Marvin Harrison, Trey McBride, this offense is going to have to score. Their defense isn't the best. I am rising on the Cardinals in general, and James Conner is such a big piece to this balance of this offense. So love him. I think RB18 right now is his floor. I think he gets close to RB1 territory by the end of the season. Again, as long as he stays healthy. Josh Jacobs is a guy that I would be targeting. I think a lot of people are going to talk about the Packer receivers, Watson, Reed, Dobbs. Go after those guys because Jordan Love's coming back. Some people may not see it like I see it. I think the guy that's going to benefit is Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs has been getting a lot of work without Jordan Love there, but his efficiency is going to rise drastically because Jordan Love is there. And Josh Jacobs, he'll catch the ball. He'll play on all 3 downs. He's a workhorse, and he's going to have way more touchdown opportunity, way more explosive opportunity because teams are going to have to respect the pass. With Malik Willis, they don't respect the pass, right? So I view Jacobs as somebody currently RB30. He's going to be definitively an RB2, and his workload is debatably an RB1 workload inside of one of the 10 best offenses and maybe even a top 5 offense with Jordan Love. They've been cooking even without him. So I think Jacobs is a great buy low opportunity right now. Before Jordan Love comes back, this guy is going to start to cook for the rest of the year. Sell high opportunity on Kyren Williams. Kyren Williams of the Los Angeles Rams, I have him on one of my big league fantasy teams. I'm very happy so far, right? I wouldn't really think about going out there and offering him in a trade. But if somebody offered me a trade for Kyren Williams, I would definitely listen because I think that he is kind of fugazi, right? I feel like his production is a little bit fake. Kyren, he's RB4. I like the player. I like Stafford, McVay. I like the scheme. I really liked him this offseason. But part of the reason I liked him is because they'd have Nakua, they'd have Kupp, they'd have a good offensive line. Well, part of the problem right now is the offensive line is terrible. Stafford is 1 hit away from going down, and that just completely shatters his fantasy season. Kyren Williams, and Kupp is dealing with injuries. Nakua is dealing with injuries. I do think that hurts Kyren in terms of his upside. He's still going to score his touchdown a game, it feels like. He's got 5 in 4 games, but that's due to regress. How many running backs are going to score 2 touchdowns a game? That really doesn't happen, right? So I just feel like he's not getting a huge pass catching load either. He is the most trustworthy weapon right now in the offense, so they're giving him a ton of volume, but it also feels like Blake Corum at some point later in the season could eat into his workload. We've seen Kyren last year go down with injury because he's a smaller running back. So there's a lot of factors here about Kyren where if I could sell him now, he's an elite running back in fantasy right now. He's very consistent. People are going to, look at the workload. They're going to see what he did last year. They're going to be very excited to add him to their team. And if I could get an elite receiver out of it, or if I could get, if I'm a little desperate with injuries, say I have McCaffrey on my team and I don't have that replacement, and I could get multiple players to help me right now, to help my team, maybe I'm interested in moving Kyren because I just feel like his ceiling is pretty much what he's doing right now, and he's probably going to get a little bit worse as the season wears on. And my final sell high at running back is J.K. Dobbins, who's currently the RB12. He exploded in week 1, and many people probably didn't start him in week 1. He then had a very good week 2, and a lot of people were probably elated about week 2. And then in week 3, he got some work. He definitely had his role, but he just played a very good defense in the Steelers. And I think people will realize that amongst your league. So I wouldn't really be too worried about that. But Dobbins, he is splitting a lot of the work with the other running backs in the backfield. Herbert is banged up. The O-line, more importantly, at tackle is really banged up. The Chargers as a team, I think have benefited from a weak schedule to start the year. They started with, right, the Panthers, where Dobbins went absolutely off, and then he went off in week 1 against the Raiders. Like, those are two bad football teams. Then they played the Steelers, who are a good team with a great defense, and they looked more like what we thought, which is kind of like not a very talented team. They're well coached, they're competitive, but honestly, Dobbins right now at RB12, he's not going to be an RB1 for the rest of the year. He's probably going to be an RB2, which is great where you drafted him. You probably got great value where you drafted him, which is why I said you should draft him late in your drafts. He was my big target at the end of drafts. But now if you can sell him at the RB1, RB2 price tag, the production that he's put up right now, and get a player that was drafted way ahead of him in drafts that may be slipping a little bit, say, Josh Jacobs, James Conner, you could get James Conner in a trade with a swap, I would do that. So Dobbins has been good. Dobbins has a good workload. He's known to have an injury history, but there's definitely concern there moving forward that he's going to be able to reach these heights for the rest of the year. So he's definitely high in terms of sell high. And then at the wide receiver position, Mike Evans. Mike Evans is a buy low for me as wide receiver 40 right now. I just believe in Mike Evans. He's Mr. 1,000 yards. He's never missed it. He's never not cracked that number. I like the Bucs offense. I like Chris Godwin. I like Baker. I think Tristan Wirfs is amazing. I don't think they have a great running game, which forces them to throw. I think there definitely will be better weeks ahead than the Broncos game. They had a terrible game against the Broncos. Evans wasn't very good in week 2 either. And when you think about it, he went against Pat Surtain in week number 3. In week number 2, he went against a Lions secondary that he torched in the playoffs last year. They added Carlton Davis, his former teammate, who is a good matchup for Evans given his size and physicality. And they just did everything to take him out of that game, right? So he's only really had one great matchup against the Commanders. I would say that Evans, just moving forward, his production is due to regress in a positive fashion. I don't think Godwin is going to be performing at a top 10 rate for the rest of the year. I think that is due to kind of split with Evans. He is a great red zone option. They love to throw him the ball in the red zone. They love to throw him the ball in the end zone. And I still think he's a great player. Like, he showcases great hands, good speed for his size, great physicality. This is a Bucs team that with all their injuries on defense as well, they're going to have to throw the ball, going to have to score points, going to have to keep up on the scoreboard. So I think his breakout this year is coming soon. So I would buy low on Mike Evans if I had the opportunity. Drake London at wide receiver 23 is kind of a buy low. I would just buy Drake London. He might just be a buy in general because he's kind of had 2 pretty solid weeks in a row. Like, week 2 was pretty darn good with the touchdown added at the end. Week 3, pretty good as well, right? Like, not bad against the Chiefs. He had like 66 yards and like 8 catches. That's pretty solid, right? But I think it's only going to get better. Like, week 1 was a bit of a struggle against Porter and the Steelers, that great defense. Then it ramped up against the Eagles because they were in comeback mode. And then in week 3, solid production against the Chiefs, which have a very good secondary, Trent McDuffie, right? But Drake London just feels like a guy that's going to see consistent volume, consistent receptions. Feels like a great PPR option right now because Cousins looks like himself, looks accurate, looks on time, looks like he can deliver the ball to Drake London. And London, as we've seen in this offense, is clearly the alpha. He's clearly the number 1. Like, Mooney's been a nice story. He's been good. Pitts has still been disappointing. So that just means that we can clearly see that shakeout, right? Like, we can see Drake London's 1. We can see Darnell Mooney's 2. We can see Kyle Pitts' 3. They're going to run the ball with Bijan. But this thing's going to just continue to go Drake London's way. He's going to see a ton of targets every single week. So, yeah, that's why I would trade for London. I just feel a confidence that he's going to land somewhere around that wide receiver 1 range, dependent on touchdowns, right? That's pretty much what it's going to come down to. But at wide receiver 23 right now, he's not quite delivering on that price. And people might not really believe that he's going to deliver at that price. So I'd look at Drake London and say, I think there's opportunity to go after him, especially if you have somebody like Stephon Diggs who you could trade. I would say sell high on Diggs and go after somebody like London or Evans, where Diggs is actually wide receiver 10. He had multiple touchdowns in week number 1. He had a lot of catches against the Vikings in a comeback type of game where they were way out of it and they were just spamming targets and throws underneath to Diggs against the blitz. And Diggs has been fine, but I think the thing about Diggs is he's got to deal with a lot of competition. Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Dalton Schultz, Joe Mixon coming back in the running game, the Texans running the ball more, right? And then on top of that, you've got to deal with Diggs is an older guy. Typically, he's regressed over the back half of seasons the last couple of years. He's also been a very low ADOT player, average depth of target player in the Texan offense. It's a lot of volume, but a lot of 7, 6, 5-yard catches, not a lot of explosiveness. So I think that given that Tank Dell is ramping up in terms of coming back from an injury last year, he should see more volume, more catches that way. Mixon's going to come back. He's going to take more volume in general from the passing game to the running game. So I think that Diggs is just going to be more inconsistent than he's been so far this year. I think that there's going to be spread out targets and spread out wealth among these pass catchers in Houston. My final sell high at wide receiver is DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf has been going off in the first couple of weeks of the NFL season. I will say that a lot of his production has been on absolute huge plays. He had a broken play against the Patriots, right? Nobody covered him down the field, wide open touchdown. He had a 70-yard touchdown against a bad defense in the Miami Dolphins in week 3. He played the Broncos in week 1, which was a bit of a struggle against Surtain. But the last 2 weeks, he's been spectacular because of big plays. I'd be looking to move off of DK because of that exact reason. The big plays are probably unreliable. And given that there's Tyler Lockett, there's Jackson Smith and Jigba, people might be looking at DK and saying, that guy's a top 5 to top 10 real life receiver. I want him on my fantasy team, but I think that there's going to be weeks ahead where he's kind of a ghost. He's unreliable. And I think Jackson Smith and Jigba is going to eat more targets. He had a great performance against New England in week 2. I see that more consistent down the stretch. So I kind of wanted to use DK as an opportunity to talk about all these receivers. Like I think Jackson Smith and Jigba to a certain degree, given that week 1 and week 3 were kind of lousy, but week 2 was amazing. I think there's reason to buy there on Jackson Smith and Jigba. I think there's a reason to fade and sell DK because I don't think he's going to live up to wide receiver 1 production for the entire season. I could see high-end wide receiver 2 production, given that I like the passing volume in Seattle. I like Geno Smith and how he's playing, but I think Seattle's got a good defense. I think they're going to play tougher teams ahead. I think there's going to be reason why DK is a little bit more inconsistent, and there's going to be weeks where he doesn't really show up in a massive way, but there will be weeks where he does have huge games. But it's just that roller coaster I feel with DK that it's just not quite wide receiver 1 quality. That's why I would sell him right now, because people might believe that he's back to like that form that he had a couple years ago where he was a wide receiver 1 for a majority of the season. At tight end, my sell high is Dallas Goedert. He's currently, I think, the number 1 tight end in PPR, which is outrageous. Nobody saw that coming. But the biggest reason, this one's kind of obvious, so people might catch on to it, but AJ Brown should be coming back at some point. Devontae Smith is banged up. He should be coming back at some point. But there are going to be people that say, hey, AJ Brown has a hamstring. That's going to linger. Like, I could use Dallas Goedert right now and fix my tight end problem. And people are going to believe in Dallas Goedert as a tight end 1 for the rest of the year and just want to solve their tight end position. So people are going to see, yeah, talented player. He's been producing in the past. He's producing now. It's a good offense. People like the Eagles offense for fantasy. People are going to want to buy Dallas Goedert. I think there's an opportunity here to sell high and maybe even swap him for a tight end that's not performing that well, like Sam Laporta, like a guy like that. Maybe even Travis Kelce, like guys that are not playing that well, that still have probably more potential. Maybe you have to throw in another player or something like that, but you could potentially massively upgrade at that position down the stretch of the year if, Kelce comes through to his clutch ability at the end of the year. If, Sam Laporta gets a little bit healthier. Mark Andrews wouldn't be a guy that I would really target. Not a huge believer there. But there are guys like even Trey McBride, people might not completely be bought into him being an elite option because of how good Marvin Harrison has been, but he, I think, could be the number 1 tight end in fantasy. So, and then there's just other options that at tight end, like Ferguson's very solid. Like there might be people just thinking that Goddard's better than he is or like worth more than he is because of that big game against the Saints. So I'd look to sell Dallas Goedert just based on currently where he's at in this offense, the target volume he saw against the Saints, all that sort of stuff. And then the guy that I would buy low on, he might even be on your waiver wire, is David Njoku at tight end. David Njoku is a great player. He's a great football player. He was on track to have a good week 1 before getting injured. He's coming back soon from injury, and I think it's reason to trade for him because I think Deshaun Watson could be benched at some point, meaning Jameis Winston could get in there. Jameis is fantastic for fantasy, as we know. Njoku is a great yak threat. Even if Deshaun is still in there, it gives easy throws for Deshaun Watson to complete, move the chains, and Njoku's great at making something out of nothing. And I think he's clearly the number 2 option in the Browns offense, regardless of quarterback. So I think Njoku is a great addition. If you're a little sloppy at tight end right now and you need future prospects, I'd look at Njoku as somebody that would give me potential to have a tight end 1 for the rest of the year, but probably pretty cheap. If I've got a surplus of receivers or a surplus of running backs or an extra quarterback to trade, Njoku would be a guy that I would go out and target. Those are my buy low, sell high candidates at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end. Let me know yours in the comment section below. It's Mitch. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Peace.